Welcome to Cities on the Move. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Mantorville, Minnesota treasures its history, having placed all 12 of its downtown blocks on the National Historic Register. But there are some new and exciting things taking place today as well. We visit Todd Fighton to learn about the Mantorville Brewing Company. We also meet Lynette Nash, who makes delightful chocolates. Mantorville is also the county seat. Dodge County Emergency Management Director Matt Moss joins us to describe the recently completed hazard mitigation plan. We'll have all this and more. Stay tuned for Cities on the Move. Chocolate. There are so many varieties. It's hard not to find something to love about it. Lynette Nash is carrying on the family tradition at Chocolate Shop. Let's take a look.
I'm Lynette Nash, and I own the chocolate shop located in historic Mantorville, Minnesota. The business was started in 1976 by a lady named Debbie Lee, and it was bought in 1984 by a lady named Sheila Trow, and I and my mother both worked for her part-time basis from 1984 to 1989 when my mother bought it, and I've been working full-time since 1989 on it. We make all of our own product here. We do all of our own caramel. We make all of our own fondant, which is the cream centers. We do all our own toffee. All of it is done from scratch using very fresh products. We do it all the time. When you come here, you're not getting anything more than 2 days old most of the time. And the chocolate itself comes in 10-pound bulk bars that we then melt down and use to dip out. The chocolate has no preservatives, no paraffins or anything, so it is very sensitive to heat and cold and all of that, so we have to be very careful with what we're doing. One of the things about chocolate that a lot of people don't realize, they come in here and they see me wearing shorts or short sleeves when in the middle of the winter or late in season, and they're like, wow, you must really be hot. And it's like, no, my body temperature always has to maintain a specific level because my body temperature can affect how the chocolate works. So the chocolate always has to be at 89 degrees. When they see it, they think it's hot to the touch, but it's actually cool to the touch. But if I'm hot, I can actually make the chocolate go out of temperature, so I have to stay cool. Our most popular item is the Pecan Turtles, followed pretty closely lately by chocolate-covered potato chips. And it kind of depends on the season, on what we sell the most of, but always Pecan Turtles. This is a batch of caramel for us. When I do a batch of caramel, it comes out to about 15 pounds in each batch of caramel when we make it. And when we do turtles, what I do is I'll do 6 pans of turtles like this, and then we separate them off and break them. I don't have any poured out right now. When we do creams, they're cast up in cornstarch, and this is a cream center before it's dipped. And creams are the soft center item. You see, when we cast up, you make the impressions, and it's just a little metal bar that we make the impressions with, and then we pour it out with a funnel into the impressions. Very rarely do you have ornery people when you do what I do. When people come in here, the smell is the first thing that you see, or you don't see it. The first thing that you smell when you walk in here is chocolate, and most people just want to just stand there and inhale. They leave with something that they're going to enjoy and that's going to make them feel good. You get to talk to people, you get to meet people, you meet all kinds of people doing this, and that's the fun part of it.
Well, today we're talking a little bit about what it means to be prepared, and our special guest today is Matt Moss. He is with Dodge County, and you are the Emergency Management Director.
That's correct.
What does that mean?
Emergency Management Director has multiple different functions, work quite a bit with a lot of the volunteer agencies, fire departments, ambulance, along with the Sheriff's Department, local law enforcement, Homeland Security, Emergency Management, FEMA, groups like that to both prepare to respond to incidents, create an emergency operations plan, a large detailed plan that involves many different agencies to respond to disaster situations, and as I like to call it, prepare to respond, plan to respond. But also on the after effects, when we do have the disaster situations, large-scale emergencies or disasters, become involved in the Emergency Operations Center of that as like a planning role, support to help those that are responding and those that are out working hard on the disaster, help prepare them for the next step so that they have the tools, equipment, knowledge that they need for the next step in the process as that goes on.
All right. Well, and we all hope disasters don't happen, but give us a sense of you have developed actually a county-wide plan that required some formal approval by the county board. Tell us why a document like that is so important, and what did it take to prepare something like that?
A document like this is very important because as the representatives for our citizens in our county, this is their elected leadership, their appointed leadership, putting together the plans it takes to respond to that, and how once we expend all of our resources locally within the city or county, once we expend those resources, where do we go for more? How do we track down those resources? And that's why it's so important, because we need to know how to respond. And two, I like to look at it as locking your car doors in your car to prevent things from being stolen out of your vehicle. You want to make sure that you're putting in place your plans to protect yourself. In this plan that you're talking about, this is a hazard mitigation plan. It's an all-hazard mitigation plan, so it kind of covers a wide range of different hazards that are out there. And it's just like locking your car doors. What we do is put in place mitigation techniques that we can do to lessen the impact of those disaster or emergency situations from happening. There's not a lot we can do to stop them. Can't really stop a tornado or flood in that case. But what we can do is we can take measures to protect our citizens and to protect our property and public infrastructure to maintain a lifestyle following these kind of events.
All right. Give us a sense of how long it took to prepare this plan, and you named a couple of those potential disasters. What type of situations did it include?
This was, it took us about a year and a half. We're just a little bit over a year and a half in completing this plan right now. And this plan was created with a steering committee throughout all of Dutch County. So there was representatives there, and part of that steering committee from city officials, all the municipalities from within the county, township officials, county officials, planning and zoning, environmental quality, highway department. There was a very, very diverse crowd in there working on this, and that diverse group helps us put together a really solid plan. Because as you see, some people in municipalities aren't as concerned about flood situations or drought situations as a farmer may be in agricultural land. That has a larger and longer lasting impact on them than a tornado may for them. That may not last as long, the impacts. So having that diverse crowd helps make sure that you put together a very good plan.
Something that addresses every possibility.
Absolutely. And as far as what it covers, this plan covers everything from natural disasters, tornadoes, floods, wildfires, to man-made incidents, whether that be fires themselves, hazardous material incidents, train derailments, anything like that. That takes into account, you know, it's very inclusive, and like it's titled an all-hazard mitigation plan, covers a very wide range of kind of everything.
Boy, hard to be prepared for everything.
It's very, very hard to prepare for it, and this hazard mitigation plan is a little more at a 30,000-foot view of these type of incidents, because it is planning, and the purpose of it is to develop it for all hazards and not specifically one. Each emergency, each disaster situation is unique in its own way, so it's hard to put together a plan that says this is how we're going to respond to a flood, because a flood may happen as a flash flood in a very short order, and it may be something that gradually gets worse and worse, and you don't have that consistency to be able to plan for each one. So it's more at a 30,000-foot view, like I like to call it, just to overall encompass all of it and point everything in the right direction at least.
You can't really say when the tornado goes down Main Street and hits these 3 businesses in that house.
Exactly. It's very hard to plan that. You never know which way it's going to go or exactly how it's going to happen.
All right, sounds good. You talked a little bit about the levels of resources. You've got local resources and then state and national. At what juncture do those kick in? Do you necessarily have to exhaust all of your resources locally, or do things like floods automatically cause FEMA to come into the picture early on?
Being in southeast Minnesota, we're extremely fortunate with the the people in the area wanting to help out the communities that we recently had that were affected with the floods. The outpouring of assistance from other areas, from neighbors, friends, is just amazing. But more officially, the way this goes is local resources being a city, city utilizing their fire departments, ambulance, public works departments, law enforcement. And as those resources get expended and the job becomes more than they can handle, county resources start coming in, the county sheriff's department, the county highway department, those kind of groups, planning, zoning, environmental quality, emergency management, start getting involved in these type of incidents. And then as it grows even larger than that, it gets to a regional, all of southeast Minnesota, to a state level, and to a national level, being FEMA.
Okay. So it's kind of the scale of the disaster.
That's correct.
Okay.
It depends on the scale of the disaster, how large the effects are. What they look at isn't necessarily the graphical area that it covers as far as the extent of it, but what they're looking at is the overall impact on the communities affected. Okay. Does it change bus routes, mail routes? Are all of those things affected? How big of an effect did this event have on one community or one area? That's really how we gauge them, is the effect it has.
You mentioned a recent rainfall that happened not too long ago, and you kind of had the good luck or the bad luck to have to implement some of this. Tell us how it went, and did it run as smoothly as you thought it would, and what kind of community impacts occurred because of this rainwater event?
Yep, on the 23rd of September, we received quite a bit of rain. Dodge County was a little more fortunate than a lot of the other counties in the area. We received anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of rainfall and caused considerable amount of flooding. The impacts were very, very large on it. School bus routes, schools were dismissed early. School bus routes were changed. Mail routes were changed. There was a lot of roads that were flooded, which having those roads flooded and impassable has an effect because the ability for emergency services to get to some areas is limited. Our fire departments and ambulances needed to, are they able to get to areas that are needed for normal day-to-day things, as well as responding to this incident? Are they able to get there? So that's a big impact there. As far as our event went just as well as we could expect. I can't credit enough the people that were involved, the volunteers, fire departments, ambulance, law enforcement, those groups that were there. They were performing just at an unbelievable level. They did an unreal job. They worked extremely well together. People coming together from maintenance, public works departments, highway departments to work together for the same common goals. I was watching people that worked for county highway department and city public works departments, as well as law enforcement, fire, EMS, all filling sandbags and transporting sandbags to where they needed to go and put them out. And then many other citizens and actually large employers in the area were donating some of their employees to come help fill sandbags and take those steps we needed to as a precautionary measure on the mitigation side to see what we could do to lessen the impacts. They worked just really, really well together. And
maybe one of the benefits of developing that plan is you start to make those connections if they hadn't been there already, and then they're not unfamiliar people when you have to work together in an emergency, which is kind of a tense time, isn't it?
It is. It's a very tense time. Things become very I don't want to say panic, because this group deals with emergencies on an everyday basis. This is what their job is. But it becomes a very intense time, and everything they're doing requires split-second decisions. They have to rely on their training quite a bit. So knowing the people that you're talking to and being able to have networked with them prior to an incident and spent that time is key. Being able to, we don't want to exchange business cards in the middle of a disaster. We want to be able to do that beforehand, so we know who the key players are and who we need to talk to.
Does a hazard mitigation plan, I think of that as preparation and then addressing the emergency as it occurs. Tell us about this recent event. Is there any long-term sustained damage to infrastructure or pieces that will still be addressed by this hazard mitigation plan, or does that then become the responsibility of someone else to kind of repair the damage that was done in an incident like this?
This is, in a way, this for Dodge County is two separate planes. We're working on the hazard mitigation plan and getting that done. It's received approval from almost from every city within the county and almost every township, and then it's going on to receive state and federal approval.
Okay.
And once that's done, then we'll come back and formally adopt the plan. So without that plan being formally adopted yet, we're also working on this on the other plane of responding to this disaster situation that just happened. And now responding to that, there are mitigation techniques that are identified as a result of this.
Okay.
Roadways that might have been washed out, bridge approaches, things like that, that we know that now, as we've seen this water rise recently in the last few years a couple times, and have some of the same damages occur, maybe there's some different engineering things that we can do to prevent those roadways from washing out, using a little bit more of the solid materials of asphalt and concrete, riprap, that kind of stuff, instead of dirt and small aggregate that you'd see on a township road.
Yep. So you learn something new on every situation.
On every situation you learn something new, and it's nice because then to be able to pull that full circle with this group that we had involved in creating this plan and bring that full circle and put those plans in place so that next time we don't have near the impact. It's that's very key. And hearing throughout responding to this situation, hearing a lot of the individuals that were affected by this saying, if this flood would have happened for Dodge County 10, 15 years ago, the impact would have been much, much greater. But because of the mitigation things that we've done, a lot of the roadways opened up right away again and weren't heavily affected. A lot of damage was prevented as a result of it, which saves all of us quite a bit of money in the long run.
Good. Now you mentioned you were able to make some adjustments. This plan took you a long time. It was very thorough, and you put a lot of time and effort into it. Updating it is part of your plan as well, and as you mentioned, you learn new things in each disaster. Is it going to be easy to make those updates, or do you have to do another whole year-long process to get it updated, or what's the mechanism for improving your practices without having to start from scratch every time?
Right. What we'll do is we'll update this plan on an annual basis. We'll review the plan, and what we'll do is we'll have a couple meetings with that steering committee, although some of the members on that steering committee may change. Township boards, city councils are all part of creating this plan. So when a new person comes into that role on the steering committee, they're already pretty well up to speed on the whole plan. So as they go through that, we'll pull them together for a couple different sessions to review our existing plan, anything that's happened since this plan was created, and what kind of changes we need to make to the plan or update in the plan every year. And that will just kind of be an ongoing process.
Regular part of it.
Every year, yep.
In your experience as an emergency management director, is this common for counties to have this, or is this a relatively new piece? And would you be willing to provide advice to other counties that may not have one?
It's actually something that has been being developed since about 2000 for all of the different counties. They're starting to get through those processes. And as we talked about, it's a very lengthy process, and a lot of time is dedicated to it by a lot of different agencies to put this plan together. The only advice that I would give to anybody is to get all the key players involved right away and have them be part of creating this plan, because I can sit back behind my desk and create the best plan in the world in my book, but when it comes down to time to use that plan, the people that are going to use this plan, the people that it affects the most, are the ones you want to have involved in creating this plan for two reasons. One, the biggest reason is having them involved to start off. They know the plan and they understand the process and what it takes. So when we're in these situations, they've already had that training, if you will, and understand it completely. So getting them involved and the buy-in from those different groups is a huge, huge benefit.
Great, great. Well, if your county has not yet started the development process, you can take a look at what Dodge County has done to develop their plan, and it sounds like it has worked effectively for this recent incident that you had, and I thank you so much for coming in and telling us about it and kind of sharing some of the details of what it takes to put something like this together.
Absolutely. Thank
you.
you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Stay tuned for more Cities on the Move. It takes 2 to 3 weeks to make a good ale. Todd Fighton has been in the beer business for years and finally opened his own brewery in Mantorville. Let's find out more about how his specialty beers are made.
Brewing is in Todd Fighton's blood. He's carrying on this family tradition at the Mantorville Brewing Company in Mantorville, Minnesota.
My family's been around the brewing industry. It's in St. Paul since 1869. My great-great-grandfather Theodore came over from the Dutch-Belgian Ardennes region, specifically Limburg, and that area brewing is a very big part of its world. They worked with the family breweries in St. Paul with the horses and things of that nature. They were teamsters. My grandfather worked for the Jacob Schmidt Brewing Company up until World War II. I started brewing with my father when I was about 10 years old in 1972. We made wine. At that time, home brewing was illegal. You could only make wine at home. And so we made Burgundies, Riesling, and Rosés, Italian Rosés. And then I also made root beer. So that was kind of my start in brewing with my father.
After several years as a rep and brewer for other beer companies, Todd got a shot at his own brewery.
In about 1990, I went on to start Midwest, Rocky Mountain, and Northwest Beer Notes with Mike Ursef, and that was one of the first original consumer beer publications in the country. And we did that for nearly a decade, and that's how I came to know the gentleman here at the Mantorville Brewery. We did an interview with them in about 1997-98. They had started in 1996, and Paul Kiltonen was one of the founding members, approached me in 1998 at a Master Brewers dinner at the Jacob Schmidt Brewing Company about coming in down to help consult, which eventually became an owner and then bought everyone out in the early 2000s.
The process of creating beer includes numerous steps with specific ingredients, temperatures, and timing, starting with the recipe.
There's kind of two things. One is the creating of the beer, and that's a lot of work with others besides myself. I work very closely with Jim Hoft at Cargill Malting, with my hop growers, several dealers I deal with in the Yakima Valley, and sitting down and talking about their experiences with different hops and different malts, pouring through the internet and doing a lot of research from other home brewers, and then using my background and my experiences and knowing my brewery, how it works and how it operates with different malts, and then sitting down and formulating a recipe. In the brew kettle, we'll first of all, it depends what size brew we're going to do. And we know what depth that we want to be, and we get our water going and heat it up. That's what's called hot liquor in the brewing industry. Once we've got to a certain mash temperature that we're looking for, then we'll pump over to our mash tank. And that's where we actually mix the grain and the water together, and you create a mash, what's called a mash. We do, because we're an ale brewery, largely we do a single-step infusion. But we have a few tricks if we wanted to do lagers, that we could do some lagers here, which would get into more step infusion or decoction mashing. That will sit in there for about 45 minutes, and that's where the starch and the sugars are converting. Once that's done, you have basically a very sweet malt liquid left behind. It's the same thing that Dairy Queen, except on the liquid side, that you would put in a malted milk. That's what it would taste like. So it actually would make a really great malted milk at that point. But once we get to about 45 minutes in mashing, when the grain and the water are steeped together, then we start recirculating in the mash tank. And then we start pumping over to the kettle. And we do that at a certain rate. Every 10 minutes, we'll check to see where it's going. We take it over on a slow, steady path over. And once we get to the right depth that we want to be in the kettle, then we're at the point where we actually start brewing. Once we hit boil, that's where the first hop, or what we call the bittering hops or kettle hops, are added in. And then at different stages for the next hour to hour and a half, depending on the brew and how things are working, we start adding in aroma and flavor hops. Then we're going to pump it through the heat exchanger, and that's going to drop it down to 65 degrees and from boiling. And that's at the point where we go into this tank here, the fermenter, and we add the yeast. And when we have the yeast added to that, then now we're starting to make beer.
After a period of conditioning and kegging, the final product is ready for the public. Stagecoach beer is available in several formats, primarily distributed in the Twin Cities and southern Minnesota.
Our products now are served on draft, and we're expanding our draft production now that we finally have our bottle production started, or in 6-packs, and then obviously the growlers at the brewery. In Minnesota, we can only sell growlers from the brewery. And that's kind of, I think, a neat thing anyways, because then it's fresh draft off the spigot. You come taking a tour, and it's kind of fun that way. So.
Mantorville Brewery, bringing craft brewing to the region. For more information about Stagecoach ales and porter, visit mantorvillebeer.com.
And now for the calendar of events. BioFest Alternative Energy Celebration on October 16th is an alternative energy celebration with seminars and demonstrations. The event will be held at Spatial Designs in Mason City, Iowa. There will be informational booths, food, entertainment, and raffles. Hours are 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and admission is free. The inaugural Mankato Marathon, presented by Hy-Vee, will be held in Mankato on Saturday, October 23rd. The Mankato Marathon will include a full marathon as well as a half marathon and 10K events. An expo, pasta feed, and Kids K will kick off the event the night before. The route will highlight major trails, parks, and Mankato's city center. As a certified marathon, the Mankato Marathon will serve as one of the last opportunities of the season in Minnesota to qualify for the famous Boston Marathon. For more information, visit mankatomarathon.com. Enjoy the beautiful fall days before the first snow flies. Many communities host apple or pumpkin picking festivals. In Fairmont, Minnesota, visit Center Creek Orchards on weekends through October 31st. Activities include hay rides, storytelling, corn piles, scarecrow building, castle bouncer, giant maze, apple sling, and so much more. Pick your own pumpkin from the pumpkin patch and select apples from over a dozen Minnesota varieties. For more information, visit centercreekorchard.com. And if you have an event to share with our viewers, log on to ksmq.org and post it today. Next week on Cities on the Move, we check out Dodge Center, Minnesota. Please join us Tuesday, October 19th at 6:30 p.m. on KSMQ for another edition of Cities on the Move. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Good night.
Production of this program is made possible in part through a grant from the Blandin Foundation.